Manchester United, when it came to the bit, the headlines were there. We all saw them. Dan Ashworth, hugely sought after gentleman in the world of football, was at Newcastle United. He then joined Manchester United as part of the major rebuild there. Was appointed sporting director. But Simon, after fighting so hard to get him in, how has the situation manifested itself whereby Dan Ashworth parts company mutually with Manchester United 5 months in? What would bring such a situation about?
Well, it's better to find out now that you don't have the synergy that you thought you have. Maybe he's going to Arsenal. Maybe they've got a sporting director vacancy. Look, I mean, the bottom line is they spent a couple of £1 million or whatever it was to get him out of his contract with Newcastle. And people can say, well, that was profligacy. Well, they spent £35 million on Donny van der Beek and just sold him for 500 grand. People make decisions that are not necessarily the ones that they think they're going to be. Better to find it out quick. If you're going to get to it fast. If you don't think that someone's got the chops, or the relationship isn't right, or the dynamic isn't good enough, or he isn't what you thought he was going to be, or the environment doesn't suit, or you just got a complete utter disconnect, then make the decision and make it quick. And
are there not question marks over the due diligence that was or wasn't done?
Well, the due diligence with Dan Ashworth is in the public domain. It's there. He's accredited with the Brighton situation and the recruitment of players. He's accredited with St George's Park and ultimately the creation of an opportunity there with Gareth Southgate and so on and so forth. He's accredited with West Bromwich Albion. Once upon a time, he's accredited with Newcastle.
So why is he such a bad fit for Manchester United?
Who knows? I mean, the bottom line is you've got personalities there. You've got he of the marginal gains. Obviously has some input in there. You've got people that made decisions. I mean, look, they needed to own their decisions. His fingerprints were all over Ten Hag. So I don't think it's a particularly glowing endorsement of Dan Ashworth.
Is he the only one of that whose fingerprints are over Ten Hag?
Well, clearly they all are. But I think Brailsford was in that camp as well. But I'm not a fan of Brailsford's. I don't think it's portable knowledge. I think there's a very different and unique skill set. I embrace the idea that different sports can add different values to people's perceptions. But there is something about acquired knowledge, and not everything is portable. You can't just transfer knowledge from one space to another. You need to acquire it. You can't get experience. You can't buy it, borrow it, or pretend to have it. You either got it or you haven't. Right?
I think it was Ashworth who said, though, that it was a previous administration that kept Ten Hag on. Regardless of that, in February, this was Sir Jim Ratcliffe talking about the pursuit of Dan Ashworth.
He would be very good for Manchester United, in my view. You know, it's understandable that somebody like Dan, who is very, very good at his job, would see the Manchester United job as a very interesting challenge at this stage of his career. So particularly with the challenge at Manchester United, which is getting it from where it has been in the last 11 years, which has been disappointing, to where we would like to get it, which is at the top of the tree of football.
Something's gone badly wrong here, Simon.
Well,
someone didn't read the room right.
Well, look, people fall out. Dynamics are different. I don't know when Jim said that. That may well be before the guy walked in
February.
Well, that's a while ago. That's before he actually knows the guy. That's before he's actually worked with the guy. That's before the guy has sat in an environment. And ultimately, perhaps his personality clashes there. Perhaps the new CEO that's come over here, who was the chief football officer at Manchester City, has a personality clash with him. Who's going to go in that situation? A chain is as strong as its weakest link. The bottom line is that they've made a decision, whether it's mutual or whether it's based upon one party not wanting to work with the other. It's kind of academic. Again, I'll give you an example. People talk about the decisions that are made, but you buy players and you bought Jadon Sancho for £75 million. That's been a disaster for them. They bought Donny van der Beek, as I just said, for £35 million. He played 35 games. It cost them £1 million a game. The Dan Ashworth decision is nothing. They spent a couple of £1 million. He's out the door. Move on to the next opportunity.
How does Ashworth look after this experience?
Well, look, I think lots of people in football have earned reputations, or have gotten reputations they haven't earned. I'm not suggesting that falls in that space for Dan Ashworth. I mean, I spoke to Eddie Howe about him the other day, who was very diplomatically polite about him and spoke very well of him. But Dan Ashworth, moves around with opportunities that suit Dan Ashworth. He landed upon the biggest opportunity of his career. This was the moment that I figured that we're going to see if this man is all he's cracked up to be. Because it's one thing doing it at Brighton and being successful at West Bromwich Albion and being successful on the rebuild under the anybody but Ashley regime that was in Newcastle then, for as far as the fans were concerned. It's another thing landing in the biggest pond. And 5 months into it, for whatever reason, I mean, you watch them at games, it's like the proletariat, isn't it? It's like the Politburo of the Russians sitting there on top of this, but all looking down on what they've got and what they haven't got.
That's right.
Who knows why they parted, but I think if you're going to get to it, in commercial terms, get to it quick, and they've done that.
Well, when it comes to honesty, is honesty always the best policy for any owner? When it comes to Sir Jim Ratcliffe talking about a fanzine outlet, was honesty the best policy here? We'll look at that in a sec. Ruben Amorim in charge of the football club, but a 3-2 defeat at the hands of Nottingham Forest at home. And now, certainly in the short term, questions being asked. Where do they go? Behind the scenes, questions being asked as well. As we just discussed here with Simon, Dan Ashworth has left his role as sporting director of the football club after fighting so hard to get him. How's it come to this? Mutually agreed that it's over 5 months in. But before that announcement was made about Dan Ashworth, Sir Jim Ratcliffe spoke to a Manchester United fanzine, gave an interview. And to say the least of it, Simon, some of the comments from Sir Jim to the fanzine raised the odd eyebrow. We're still in the last century on data analysis here. There is major change to come to achieve elite status. A lot of inertia has built up in the organisation. Inertia. What's inertia? A tendency to do nothing or remain unchanged. Stagnant. What do you think of the comments that Sir Jim has made here to a fanzine? Is he being too honest?
I think he's calling it as he sees it. I mean, I think it's pretty much self-explanatory. I don't know what he's benchmarking it against. Has he been around all the other football clubs and determined how well their data analysis works? Has he got a reference point for that? He's a very advanced thinker in his own industry. I've listened to him a few times speaking in this industry, and I have to say, irrespective of the fact that I'm remarkably impressed with him as a commercial man, when I hear him speak about football, I don't come away thinking I'm remarkably impressed by his observations about football. But I do like the fact that he's gone into Man United and given him a wake-up call. People are talking about the idea that Man United are cutting costs and this and the other. If they wanted to cut costs, they wouldn't have spent 175 million quid on players in the summer, would they? So, I mean, the ultimate aim is to make an organisation fit and focused and lean and dynamic and forward-thinking and aligned. And that means that sometimes you have to chop off dead wood and get people livened up and focused on the bigger picture rather than a smaller mentality they've maybe been allowed to develop under previous chief executives. But the guy who's been brought across from Man City has been brought across from being the chief football officer into the CEO. That would tell me that as a chief football officer at Man City, he's going to be very close to Dan Ashworth. So work out the dynamic of why that relationship may or may not have worked and who and where the breaking point of it is. Radcliffe has spoken about a number of things. He spoke the other day about the ticket prices and turned around and said, should it be cheaper to watch Man United than it is to watch Fulham? And he has an argument to be made, because obviously the outrage about the pricing policy of Man United and the lack of concessions, and he's referenced the fact that actually, why should Man United be cheaper to watch than Fulham? He says a lot of things, and I think it's important to be blunt, to the point, not to be obtuse in what you're saying, and then to enact your wishes. If he's got reference points and touch points, I don't know which clubs he's been to, because it ain't Nice. If that's what he's going to use as a benchmark.
I mean, talk about blunt. We need to get recruitment sorted. It's been poor.
But that's stating the obvious, isn't it? I mean, Manchester United have spent so much money. And again, we talk about the players that were bought in the summer. I don't know what Martin thinks of this. But I would believe and subscribe to the view that a lot of them were complicit in those decisions. Were those Manchester United players being bought for Manchester United per se, or were they being bought for Ten Hag's version of Man United? If they were bought for Ten Hag's version of Man United, then all those guys that made those decisions are in dereliction of their duty. Because if they ain't good enough for Man United, then they've all got their fingerprints across here.
We're still in the last century, Martin, on data analysis here. That's what he says. Good luck to those working in data analysis this morning.
Yeah, and Bereda, obviously, we're saying that he's come from Man City, he's had recent experience of all of this, and maybe he's not seeing enough from Dan Ashworth. Okay, where's the data? Where's the analysis? Look at the players we bought in the summer. We're not actually on blob with all of this, and Ratcliffe's thought, okay, right, let's just make the change. This was built up as this incredible man who was Dan Ashworth was at the heart of all the successes everywhere else. That's what it looks like, Jim, because I can think of no other reason why you just pull the plug on somebody. He's done more gardening leave than he's actually done work at Manchester United. So I'm not sure how he could have made a big impression, but it's what he's not been doing that seems to have affected his decision.
So on the field, in comes Ruben Amorim. Ten Hag's almost been forgotten about. Manchester United 13th in the Premier League this morning, Martin. They've won 5 of 15 played. So on the pitch, it's back-to-back defeats for them. 3-2 defeat at home to Nottingham Forest. Is the remainder of this season a free hit for Amorim?
No, not with what goes with Manchester United and what the club stands for, Jim. you watch it from afar, and it has to get worse in a way before it gets better. You can see that he's stitching information and saw a bit of identity. They tried to nullify Arsenal, but they didn't really have any kind of punch of their own. And then they get beat by a Forest team that was rampant on the counter attack. There's so much work to do there, and a lot of it will be around players recruitment. It's a huge area for them, and Jim Ratcliffe feels he's got to get this right. If he hasn't got the right man in class, let's change it, because that's the way it starts, isn't it? The person who is in charge of recruitment is really key to Manchester United, because they've got the right manager now in the coalface, working with the team. The team's not good enough. The players aren't good enough. Now they have to find the personnel that can actually take the club forward.
Wonder where they are in terms of conversations in the odd corridor here or there, Simon, either at Carrington or at Old Trafford itself, with the likes of Amorim. I wonder what he's thinking at the moment. Sir Jim, I wonder what he's thinking at the moment, because Ashworth, no doubt, is viewed as a major disappointment.
I should think Amorim's thinking, I've got a great job at Man United. I ran around the entire summer photobombing other football clubs to get a job in English football, and I've landed the biggest one. I've got to get on with my job.
You always say that. Is that necessarily fair?
Yeah, because I think there's an undignified nature of the way that he behaved in the summer. Do I think he can do the job? We'll see. Has he done a great job at Sporting? Fantastic. Did Erik ten Hag do a great job in Holland? Absolutely. Does he appear to have a bit of a personality and a bit of charisma about him? Yeah. Is it a necessity to have charisma in a Man United job? Absolutely. Absolutely. Will he get away with it? Can he weather what's likely to happen to Man United this season? And, Martin makes the point, and it's a very good point. You can't, you don't get a free hit. The question is, can he weather the storm when United aren't winning games?
And he can only work with what he's got, can't he? The players that he's got available.
But he can make them better, and he can make them more effective in what they're doing, so that there's some sort of building block for him to build upon. We will see. We will see. I mean, I see more of the kind of manager that I like in him than I liked in Ten Hag. But this is a unique job. It's not
specifically what.
Well, I think he's got more personality. I think he's got more. He communicates better currently than Ten Hag ever did. He looks like he's ready for the challenge. He looks like he's able to present himself to the media, which is part and parcel of the job. Whether you like it or you don't, in order to manage a club like Manchester United or big clubs like Man United, Arsenal and Liverpool, you've got to have a bit of personality alongside the basics of being a good coach. And I think he's got a bit of personality. He's got battles to win. You watch that Man United side and they're not aroused enough. I know that's an unfortunate expression, but they're not. And they, and that is something, that's a state of mind. And he's got to get them out of that.
He's got to change the culture,
state.
Isn't he? I was watching a game recently. It got to half time and they were doing a warm up in the second half, and they came out for the start of the second half, and suddenly they got a coach doing warm up, and there's half of them not prepared to do it. It's like they've been sat in there and having a half time cup of tea, and Rashford's not on the line to run. No, be ready, because we're going to be doing this. This is the new culture at Manchester United.
They better be ready.
About.
It's Manchester City next.
Yes, it is. And
misfiring Manchester City.
It's not just about getting up for that game. It's about getting up for every game and every training session. And the culture has to change. And Ten Hag allowed that to happen.
Can you believe where they've got to, Martin? You remember Manchester United in their prom. They were your great adversary.
It's become mediocre, hasn't it? That's what we're looking at. And you thought, certainly in my lifetime, I'd never be able to say that about Manchester United, that they've just fallen away so much. But you look at the team, it doesn't frighten anyone.
Do you have a wry smile about it?
No, not at all. Not at all. I think it's a fantastic club. It's got great history, but it's had its time, hasn't it? For now. Who's to say they won't come back? But there are so many issues at the football club, Jim, putting the season tickets up during the season, price tickets. I don't think they're. It's not a great look, is it, for such a great club right now? And certainly when you get rid of the director of football, that is a huge decision, Jim. But decisions have to be made there. He's going to have to upset people to get what he wants to, and I get it.
For sure. One set of fans might end up upset tonight because it's a big one for both West Ham and Wolves. It's live on talkSPORT.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.